Hare Krishna. Good morning, dear devotees from Sri Jagannath Puri Dham. My name is Madhavananda Das, and these are our adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. This is our 97th session in a series we're calling Meeting in Kurukshetra, and we're still in the 47th chapter of the 10th canto, which is a Brahma Gita, and this is our 50th session today from the Brahma Gita, and it's our fourth session on a couple of verses we're speaking about the danger of attachment to Krishna. So we'd like to begin with offering some prayers to the Bhagavatam that my Guru Maharaj instructed me to recite. Gauragra Ganya Gana Gocha Goloruharam Gauranga Gudatama Gopyata Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshikavaram Satatam Namami Narayanam Namaskrityam Naramschaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Vedi Ramayaneshchaiva Purane Bhadate Tata Adavante cha madhye cha hari sarvatra giyate Mukam karoti vachalam bhangum mangayate girim Yat kripa tamaham vande shri gurum dinataranam Paramananda madhavam Paramananda He Madhava Padunga Luchi Makaranda Se Makaranda Panakori Anande Bolo Hari Hari Harinka Name Vandavela Parikori Be Chakadola Se chaka dolanka padaye manamo rahu nirantare manamo nirantare rahu ha Krishna boli jiva jao ha Krishna boli jao jiva Moteu dada radha dava Moteu dada radha dava Moteu dada radha dava Dharma projita kaita vota padamo nimatranam satam Vedyam vastavamata vastashivadam tapatrayon mudanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamune Krite Kim Vaparayishvara Sadyo Hridjavarudyate Takriti Bishu Shushu Vistakshanat Nagamakol Pataro Galitam Phalam Shukamukadamita Dravasam Yutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavuka Anaito pasamam sakshat bhakti yogam madhoksaje lokasya janito vidvams chakre satvata samhitam yasham vaishyamanayam krishna paramapurushe bhaktirudpadyate pumsa shoka moha bhayapaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning, dear devotees from Sri Jagannath Puri Dham. My name is Madhavananda Das. These are Adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. We're speaking again about the meeting in Kurukshetra and all the events which led up to that, which our thesis is that this thing is one of the most important topics for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And the entire practically the entire 10th canto, the Bhagavatam, leads up to this, but especially after Krishna leaves Vrindavan, and most especially the 46th chapter of the 10th canto, the Brahma Gita, which speaks about the mad talks that the gopis had with a bumblebee. And it speaks about the message that Uddhava gave when he came to Vrindavan to the gopis, and how Uddhava was completely astonished to see the nature of their love. So now we've been speaking from text 47 and 48 in our last 4 sessions. Text 38 to 52 of this chapter, the 15 verses, comprise the response of the gopis to Krishna's message. So let's go ahead with text number 47 again. Let's see here. Maybe I can go ahead and put this on the board here too for everybody. The gopis, they say, Param sokyam hinarashyam swarinyapyaha pingala tajjanatinam na krishne tatapyasa duratyaya. The gopis, they're saying that real param sokya, the best happiness, the most happiness, is when someone develops vairagya. They become indifferent to Krishna. But still at the same time they say tatapi, still tatapyasa duratyaya. We have this asha, this hope within our heart, which is duratyaya. It's just not possible for us to give up that hope. And then in text 48 they go on to say, Ka utsaheta sankyutam utama shloka samvidam anicchato piyasya shrir angana chavate kvachit. Who can give up? Ka utsaheta sankyutam. Who can give up? Who can tolerate giving up having these talks with Krishna? These talks which the gopis described as samvidam, or Prabhupada translates as intimate talks. And although Krishna doesn't show any interest in her, still Lakshmi Devi doesn't ever give him up. So this is our subject matter today. How the gopis, their love for Krishna is very paradoxical and very contrary. It seems like they're angry with Krishna, but they're not. And to try to understand this, looking back some, we're going very slow. Sometimes we take 2 steps back to go 1 step forward. We were looking at some verses from Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and something we printed in our Krishna Katamrita magazine some years ago, in an article that we titled The Dangers of Reading Srimad Bhagavatam. And Smeram Bhangitaya Parachitam Sachivistirna Dristim. The gopis are saying that my dear friend, Saki Bandhu Sangesti Rangaha, if you're attached to your friends, the worldly friends, then don't Smeram Bhangitaya Parachitam Sachivistirna Dristim. Don't look at Krishna's smile when he's standing on the bank of the Jamuna. It's a very, very dangerous thing. And then the gopis, again, they say to each other, I'm trying to remember the word that's used here. Oh, they address each other as dimba. Dimba means like a foolish child. Ham ho dimba paramasuda subadam hanta dharmartha kama. How is it, my foolish child, that you're allowing Varna Karnadvani Pati, this to enter into your ears, this katha about Krishna, which is a dasama skanda, or the topics of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. Because if you hear that subject, then hanta dharma artha kaman, you're going to give up dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, those 4 types of religiosity which people in Vedic culture live for. So in his commentary, we've been speaking about this in our last sessions. In his Laghu Vaishnava Toshini, Srila Jiva Goswami says that this is Braja Stuti It's glorification in disguise. It's aprastuta prasangsa alankar. It's a particular type of alankar or literary ornament, aprastuta prasangsa, which means it's a kind of indirect expression. The gopis are criticizing, but actually their criticism is really a type of glorification. And it's the nature of the gopis. They can't stop thinking about Krishna. And we reviewed a few of the verses again from the 47th chapter, the 10th canto, and how the gopis were criticizing Krishna, apparently, and saying that Krishna is like a hunter, and he shot, in his previous life as Ramachandra, he shot the king of monkeys with an arrow, Bali Maharaj, and he cut off the nose and ears of Suparnika. He took everything away from Bali Maharaj and bound him up with ropes, so we should give him up. But then the gopis are quiet for a moment and they say, but dusya just tat katartata. It's impossible to give up his topics. Those topics, they say, they're lila karna piyusha. They're nectar for the ear. So that's something we want to speak about today. We also looked at the 90th chapter, which I want to just mention again because this is, all these things are connected together. The 90th chapter, the final chapter of the 10th canto, is also intimately connected with this 47th chapter and this meeting in Kurukshetra, and with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood in Jagannath Puri. And as we mentioned, I'm going to say again, just appointing a road sign, read Lalita Madhav and think very deeply about it. That's all we want to try to say about that right now. But all of these things are connected, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentaries, he says that the Mahishis, their words are indicative of Unmadana, or divine madness, just like the gopis were also experiencing. And so I want to go back again, very briefly, to some verses from Chaitanya Bhagavat, from the 26th chapter of the Madhya Lila, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu one day was doing something very, very interesting. Ekadina gopi bhave jagata ishvara brindavana gopi gopi boli nirantara Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Ekadina, one day, Gopi Bhave, that person who's Jagata Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, fell into the mood of the gopis. And he started calling out, Vrindavan, Gopi, Gopi, Boli Nirantara. Again and again, constantly he was chanting like that. And one young Brahmin came there, and he told them, he said, hey, Gopi, Gopi Kena Bolani, my Pandit, what are you doing chanting as Gopi, Gopi? Stop that. Gopi, Gopi Chari. Krishna Bolaha Tvarita. You should chant Krishna's name. Ki punya janmi be Gopi, Gopi Namalali. What kind of piety are you going to get by chanting Gopi, Gopi? By just saying, cowherd person, cowherd lady. What is that? How is that a transcendental thing to say? There's so many gopis all over the world, ladies who take care of cows. That's not found in Shastra, that you should say Gopi, Gopi. What is this thing? He said, rather, Krishna Namalali se punya vedi boli. All the Vedas, they say, you should chant Krishna's name. And Mahaprabhu became furious. And he said the same thing that the gopis are telling to Uddhava in the 47th chapter of the 10th canto when they heard Krishna's message. He said, what is this Krishna? You want me to chant Krishna's name? Krishna is a rogue. He's a debauchee of Lampata. He killed Bali from behind a tree with his arrow. He cut off the nose and ears of Suparnika. He took everything away from Bali Maharaj. He quoted all these things in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And he said, what will I get by chanting his name? And then Mahaprabhu picked up a stick and started running to beat that devotee, that Brahmin who's a devotee, who's telling him to chant Krishna's name. It's a bona fide instruction. So that was a little bit of a review. Now I'd like to begin with our discussion from today. This is from the Madhya Lila, chapter 14, which comes right after chapter 13. Chapter 13 of Madhya Lila is about the Rath Yatra. in Jagannath Puri. And after the Rath Yatra, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he went to rest in Jagannath Vallabha Gardens. At that time, Maharaj Prataparudra, who had been wanting to get the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, on the advice of Ramananda Roy, approached Mahaprabhu there. Incidentally, Ramananda Roy's place is still there today in Jagannath Vallabha Gardens, and his deities of Krishna Gopal. He's Chaturbuj deity of Krishna who's been worshipped in Jagannath Puri since long before the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's a very unique deity. For those of you who've read Lalita Madhav and thought deeply about it, and we'll discuss these things later, but for some little postgraduate listeners, those of you who've read Lalita Madhav and you can contemplate the deity that was found there in the Nava Vrindavan garden, who may be a four-armed deity, because it's Dwarka, but this four-armed deity here in Puri that Ramananda Roy was worshipping, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had said, instructed him to worship, this is a four-armed deity, but it's not an ordinary deity of Narayan. He has a Shankha Chakra, a conch shell, and a Sudarshan Chakra, like Jagannath, but he has two other hands which are playing a flute. And as our teacher Fakir Mohan Prabhu pointed out to me, he said we only know of three deities like this in all of India, in the whole world. One of them is inside the Jagannath Mandir by the Horse Gate. One of them is in the museum, the State Museum in Bhubaneswar, and one of them is in Jagannath Vallabha Gardens. So it was in Jagannath Vallabha Gardens. Mahaprabhu was resting. Ramananda Roy was living there, advised Maharaj Prataparudra. You go there and you massage Mahaprabhu's feet and you recite some verses. And so he began reciting verses from the Gopi Gita. And when Mahaprabhu heard him reciting those verses, he said, Sunite, Sunite Prabhu, Santosha Apar, Bala Bala Boli Prabhu, Bale Bar Bar, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami uses the word sunite. Sunite means to hear. He uses it twice. Sunite, sunite, te, a at the end in Bengali grammar means that to this thing. So he's hearing again and again. Means he's hearing very, very intensely, very, very eagerly, very ecstatically. Santosh apar. Santosh means with happiness, with satisfaction. Apar, fantastic, great satisfaction. And Mahaprabhu said, Bolo Bolo Bali Prabhu. You go on, speaking this, go on, go on. Speak this again and again and again. And Maharaj Prataparudra had been reciting this verse, Tavakatam Ritam. And Mahaprabhu said, Tavakatam Rita Shlok, Raja Je Padila, Uti Pramaveshi Prabhu, Alingana Koila. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. When Maharaj Prataparudra, Tavakatamritam, Shloka Raja Je Padila, when he recited that Tavakatamritam verse, at that time, Mahaprabhu but previously he was Sunite, he was listening very intensely and saying, Bola, Bola, keep speaking this, keep speaking this. Suddenly, Uti, Mahaprabhu jumped up when Maharaj Prataparudra spoke this verse, Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam. Pramaveshi, with great ecstatic love, Mahaprabhu alingana koila, he went and embraced Maharaj Prataparudra. And that was the perfection of Maharaj Prataparudra's life. When Mahaprabhu heard that verse, he said that, Amulya Ratna, you've given me an invaluable gem. But Morakichu Diti Nahi Dilum Alingan. I don't have anything to give back to you. Morakichi Diti Nahi. Therefore, Dilum Alingana. I give you my embrace. And then Mahaprabhu began reciting that verse over and over again. And it says, Dui janar angi kampa nitre jaladar. That both Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Maharaj Prataparuja began to tremble. Dui janar anga, their bodies, kampa nita jaladar. Kampa means to shake. Their bodies were shaking, and tears of ecstasy began to flow down from their eyes. It was a really good day for Maharaj Prataparuja. And then Mahaprabhu began to speak over and over again one of the words from that Katavakatamrita verse. Burida, burida boli kore alingan, iho nahi jani iho hoye konjan. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It's a very, very beautiful, deep point. This is what we want to speak about today. This Tavakatamrita verse and the reception of it that Mahaprabhu gave, and the meaning of this verse as a way to expand and unpack this 47th and 48th verses of the 47th chapter of the 10th canto. So Mahaprabhu started repeating over and over again, Burida, Burida, which is from the last line of this verse, Tavakatamrita. Burida means the most munificent. And Mahaprabhu was crying and saying, Burida, Burida, you are the most munificent person. And Kori Alingana, as he was embracing Maharaj Prataparuja. I'll share something of my good fortune. Once I went to visit a very exalted Vaishnava. His name was Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj in Vrindavan. And I went there not to necessarily take shelter of him or even hear from him. I went there as a service to my Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. He was one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, and a dear godbrother, Srila Prabhupada, a good friend of Prabhupada. But I went to give him one of our Krishna Katamrita magazines. And it was a magazine we made about Damodar Leela, and I gave him that magazine. And Maharaj immediately, seeing the magazine, tears came to his eyes. He was laying in a bed sick. And when I gave him the magazine, he became ecstatic, and he started crying in ecstasy, just seeing the picture of Damodar on the cover. And then he started reciting these prayers known as the Chorga Ganda Purushastakam, the 8 prayers glorifying the greatest of thieves. And as he was doing that, I showed him in the magazine, we've printed these songs, these prayers, along with some comments from our Guru Maharaj on it. And then I showed him, and also there's some article from your Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. And when I said that to him, he was crying and crying. He started crying even more. And he took his hands, he was laying in bed, and started putting them on my head like this and crying and saying, may God bless you, may God bless you, may God bless you. It was a good day for me. So I'm sorry to tell you something about myself, but it just reminded me of that. So Mahaprabhu embraced Maharaj Prataparuja and said, you are the most munificent person, and cried with love. So this is the verse that that Maharaj Prataparuja was reciting before him. We'd like to look at this verse today. A very, very beautiful verse. And I think within this verse, we're going to find something of the mood of the Gopis in the Brahma Gita, the mood of separation from Krishna. And we're also going to find something about the meeting in Kurukshetra and something about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his mood here in Jagannath Puri. We want to see the connection between these things. Okay, so here's the verse. Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam kavi biriditam kalmasapaham Shavanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvigrinanti je Burida Janaha. Prabhupada translates this, the nectar of your words and the descriptions of your activities of the life and soul of those suffering in this material world, these narrations transmitted by learned sages eradicate one's sinful reactions and bestow good fortune upon whoever hears them. These narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power. Certainly those who spread the message of Godhead are most munificent. So this verse, very, very deep, very beautiful verse. I want to look back now at a couple of the verses we were just reciting, also from the 47th chapter, and how the Gopis were just telling Krishna, telling Uddhava, that Lila Karna Piyusha. This is a synonym for Tava Katamritam Tapta Jivanam. Lila Karna Piyusha. That the kata, the topics about Krishna, they're Karna Piyusha, they're nectar for the ears. And this verse, Tava Katamritam Tapta Jivanam, this kata is Amrit. Amrit and Piyush are synonyms for the same thing. They both mean nectar. Nectar which gives life to the living entity. So Maharaj Prataparudra was reciting this verse from the Gopi Gita. Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam. And Jiva Goswami, in his Laghu Vaishnav Toshini, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, explained this verse in a very beautiful way. I'd like to look at their commentaries. Jiva Goswami says that Krishna is speaking, and the gopis are asking, they're saying, where are you? You should come back. And Krishna's telling them, don't worry until I agree to come back. You have Krishna Kata. You can pass your time speaking topics about me. Now Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami says that there are different groups of gopis speaking the same verse. One is Swapaksha and others are Vipaksha. Swapaksha means those gopis who are favorable. And they're saying, who can describe the sweetness of the words coming from your mouth? It's indescribable. It's more relishable than Swargamrit, than the celestial nectar that you find in the heavenly planets. It's better than moksha, liberation. They give the highest nectar. And Krishna then says to them, what kind of nectar? And the gopis, they say that topics about you, tavakatamritam tapta jivanam. Tapta jivanam means when our life, tapta means to inflict or cause some suffering. When we're suffering, our jiva, our life is suffering. Hearing topics of Krishna Kata gives life to us, for those persons who are suffering. In the first canto of the Bhagavatam, I'm trying to remember the verse, Krishna describes Shoka Moha Bhayapaha. Sukadeva Goswami says, Shoka Moha Bhayapaha. That just by hearing the Bhagavatam, all Shok, Moha, and Bhaya, Apaha, are taken away. All fear, lamentation, and illusion. That's the nature of hearing Krishna Kata. And Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj, they've said, Ya nirvitis tanu britam tava pada padma jnana bhava jana kata shavanena ya asyad sa brahmani sva mahimanyapi natama bhut. That the nectar of meditating on Krishna's feet or hearing about his glories from pure devotees is so unlimited that it's far, far greater than Brahmananda. Kalmasha apaham means that the nectar of your topics defeats all types of sin, which means the aparabdha, or the kuta bij and prarabdha, all the different sinful reactions that are maybe there as a seed that we can't see just by hearing that Krishna Kata. The nectar of Swarga Lok doesn't destroy sins, but rather it increases lusty desires, which is a cause for sin. But in the case of Tavakatamritam, your nectar, the nectar of your topics, it destroys Prarabdha karma. It destroys Aparabdha, the Kuta and the Bij. It's so auspicious, it's Shravana Mangalam, because just by hearing about you, you become attracted to you. And those topics, which are atatam, always constantly being broadcast by your devotees, what do? Srimat. Srimat means that they give all Shri, they bestow all auspiciousness, all wealth, And the other nectars can't do this. So those persons who are doing kirtan for you, drinanti, they're burija. They're the greatest, most munificent persons. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami say that also this same verse was being spoken by a group of devotees who were vipaksha. They were contrary to Krishna. And as we've been hearing, in this 47th chapter, I'm trying to go slow on this so people can follow the train of thought we're giving. The gopis are complaining that we want to give up Krishna. We want to become renounced. That's the only happiness, they're saying in this 47th verse of this chapter. But we can't do it. We can't give up his topics. It's very, very difficult. So those Vipaksha gopis, Jiva Goswami said, that the word Tava Katamrita means Kata Amrita. It means topics of nectar. But if you break the Sandhi in a different way than what they're saying, and the Vipaksha gopis are saying, it's Kata Mritam. Mrita means death. Amrita means something which is without death. So your topics, Kata Mritam, they're giving death to us. And tapta means something which is inflicting jivanam, life. Those topics, they're giving pain to us. They're like putting water in boiling oil. If you put water in boiling oil, then it is like an explosion. Water starts going up and everything, and it causes so much pain when it lands on your skin. So we've heard the gopis say that your topics are auspicious, but we haven't experienced that. Rather, these people who speak these things, they're very proud because Srimat, they have some wealth, they have some beauty, and therefore they're disrespectful to the devotees. And those people who speak these topics are burida. Burida means someone who's the most munificent, but burida also means, means life. But burida can also mean someone who's destroying life. It's a word for a hunter. That your devotees who go and start speaking your katha everywhere, they're like hunters, mercilessly killing everyone. So your topics cause us so much pain. So what use to us of those topics who want to live with hopes that you're going to bless us? You're telling us, Krishna, that okay, I can't go there, it's all right, don't worry. Remember, gopis, that you spoke this verse, Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam, and you should remember that my katha will help you. And the gopis said, no, your katha doesn't help us, it causes even more problems. This is the nature of unmadana, or divine madness and ecstasy. This is the last limit of ecstatic love. Krishna promises in the Gita, Yayatam mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamiham, that I reciprocate with everyone according to how they approach me. But Krishna had to come again after the Gita. Why? Because his promise was broken. Krishna, he says that napadeham niravadya samyujam, that I don't know how to repay the gopis. Because the gopis' love is so very, very intense. Krishna left the gopis. He went to Mathura and later to Dwarka. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta comments in one place, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also, to illustrate, to reveal to the world the intense love of the gopis. If he had not left Vrindavan, who would know about the love of the gopis? But because he left, just as a goldsmith, Vishwanath says, applies heat to gold to melt it, to show the value, the purity of the gold, so Krishna also applied Vipralamba Agni, the heat of separation, on the hearts, the golden hearts of the gopis. And their hearts melted. And this is the 47th chapter of the 10th canto. This is Krishna's the height of their ecstasy, which Krishna has to repay. And to repay that, he comes again as Gauranga Mahaprabhu. So there's a connection between this 47th chapter of the 10th canto, between the meeting in Kurukshetra, and between Chaitanya Charitamrita and Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Puri. So the gopis, they're saying, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, the Vipaksha gopis say, okay, that these topics about you, Tava Katamritam, they're sweet, but only if we get to see you. Otherwise, they're very, very undesirable, and they're a cause of death. Katamritam. And Krishna replies, how is that? And then the gopis, they say that because by hearing this, our life, jivanam, tapta jivanam, it becomes full of pain and separation. Now another meaning of jivana means life, but jivana also means water. And by these topics, he says the same thing that Vishwanath is saying, we become scalded like water sprinkled on hot oil. Tapta means like hot oil, and jivana means water. And then Krishna to defend himself, he says, but then you tell me, dear gopis, why are my topics praised in the Puranas and Vedic literatures? And the gopis, they shook their heads. And they said that only poets, Kavi Bir Iditam, like Vyasadeva, praise you. No one else, because that's a nature of poets. When they hear about you, hearing about you subjects one to intense, burning feelings of separation. This is the height of ecstatic love, and we wouldn't be able to understand it unless Krishna had left Vrindavan, unless there was a meeting later in Kurukshetra, which is all reflected in Jagannath Puri, Mahaprabhu's pastimes here. So Maharaj Prataparudra is speaking these verses to Mahaprabhu, and these verses have such deep meaning. So the Vipaksha gopis in this verse, and Mahaprabhu is in that mood, so much so that he's chanting Gopi Gopi, and he's not chanting Krishna Krishna, and he becomes angry when someone tells him to chant Krishna. Mahaprabhu is meditating on their mood. So the gopis are saying that hearing about you causes one to suffer burning pangs of separation, tapta jivanam. And by this suffering, you burn up your previous sins, kalma sa apaham. So that is what happens. It's auspicious, mangalam, swasyayanam, for ordinary people to hear about these topics. And because of that, it doesn't stop. But the gopis say that's because ordinary people don't have intelligence. They're foolish. But they're going to see eventually that hearing about you brings great suffering. And then they're going to refuse to listen, and then these narrations will cease. So this is the contrary statements of the gopis, which are actually glorification of Krishna. There's a book written by one secular scholar called The Madness of the Saints. And in that book, she speaks about Gorkishore Babaji and Jagannath Das Babaji and some other personalities, and how, from an external perspective, these persons went mad. And Gorkishore Babaji is talking to Krishna, Jagannath, what's his name? The friend of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. What's his name? He used to have a long hair and a long beard. His name's not coming to my mind. It'll come to my mind in a minute. He used to put Gornitai. He would talk with his deities, and sometimes the deities would tell him, we want to take a bath. Why aren't you giving us a bath? So he said, okay, look, quit bugging me. And he'd stick one deity under one armpit and the other deity under another armpit. Go out to the Ganga and get in the water a few times. And that was their bath. He said, look, don't quit complaining to me. He's a mad person. Just like there's one Sufi saint who everybody was glorifying, and this Sufi saint would travel different places because he didn't want to stay in one place long, like Madhavendra Puri when he went to Ramuna and Gopinath stole sweet rice for him. Madhavendra Puri left in the middle of the night because he didn't want to be glorified. So in the same way, the Sufi saint, everyone glorified him wherever he would go. So he would leave. He wouldn't stay. But he came to one village and there was a whole reception. Everybody was standing out there and glorifying him as a great person. And it caused pain in his heart. So he just instinctively did something which is very much against Shastra. He kind of pulled up his pants or whatever he had, pulled out his male equipment, and started passing urine right in front of everyone. And everybody was horrified and shocked. This is not a saint. This is not a sadhu. Oh my God, how can he expose himself? There's children and women here. This is terrible. And they left him alone. In the same way as Vamsidas Babaji, that's who I was trying to think of. And Vamsidas Babaji has also said that sometimes one other sadhu in Vrindavan would sometimes put fish all around his bhajan kutir. And he did that because so many people were coming to worship him. And when they saw the fish, then they think, oh, he's not a sadhu. Once that same Vaishnava, when a wealthy man came to see him and said, Maharaj, what can I do for you? He said, well, you have a beautiful young daughter. And if you sent your daughter here to stay with me, that would be very pleasing. And that wealthy man thought, anyway, he's a sadhu. I don't understand why he's saying that. But he sent his daughter there. And the sadhu told her, I want you just to sit outside my hut. And you have a good day. Here's, take something to eat, do whatever you want to do, but just sit outside my hut. And so she was sitting out there. And then people were coming to see the great sadhu, to have his darshan and blessings. And they suddenly saw this beautiful young girl. Oh, he's not a sadhu. He's keeping this girl. They thought like that. It's like Kurukshetra's Babaji on one occasion. He was trying to hide from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so he went to the house of a prostitute. He knew, nobody's going to look for me there. Huh? And sometimes he would dress himself in opulent dhotis and things to make people leave him alone. So this is the madness of the saints. And this madness of the saints is a line of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. This madness of the saints originates in the Gopis and their Unmadana. And this is Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We should understand it very, very deeply. So this Tavakatamrita Tapta Jivanam verse is very important in that regard. The Gopis, the Vipaksha Gopis, are saying that if people are intelligent, they're going to see that hearing topics about you just brings suffering, and then they're going to refuse to listen, and then the topics of discussion will stop. And then the Gopis, these Vipaksha Gopis say that Atatam means that topics about you are spoken by persons who are evil, because they're blinded by intoxication of their wealth, Srimat, and their hope is that everyone's going to die by hearing about you, like Uddhava. That's his real motivation. He's come here to Vrindavan to kill everyone by speaking Krishna Katha. This is the madness of the Gopis, huh? And they're saying that to accomplish this Srimat means they spend money, they go from country to country all over the place, and they hire pundits to narrate the Puranas. And this is the Gopis' response to Krishna. And therefore, those pundits who are speaking about your glories in this world, Dhyanti Kandayanti, Mariyanti, they cause the death of many people, Burin. So while spreading the trap of these topics and sitting peacefully as if they were gentle souls, these pundits are actually committing genocide. Mass murder of everyone. And therefore intelligent persons should avoid these pundits and keep them at a distance, like someone who has a terrible disease. So this is the nature of the ecstatic love of the Gopis. And this is what we're hearing about in this 47th and 48th verses of the 10th canto. And trying to trace the string or the connection between these verses from the 47th chapter and the verses which are found in the meeting in Kurukshetra and in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Jagannath Puri. So text 47, we'll review that again and we'll finish with these two verses today. Param sokyam hinairashyam. I'll go ahead and put this on the screen again too. Param sokyam, svaram sokyam janayashyam, svaranyapyaha pingala, tajjanitanam na Krishne, tatapyasa duratyaya. They're saying that the param sokya, or the greatest happiness, is when we can give up everything, renounce everything, but still, tatapyasa duratyaya, we have this asa, this desire to hear about Krishna, and we can't give it up. And then in text 48 they say, Kim utsaheta sankyatum uttama shloka samvidam anichato piyasya shrir angana chavateg vachit. That who can tolerate these topics of Krishna? But even though you hear these topics, you can't give them up. So this is something about the unmadana, or divine madness of the gopis, a madness that we never would have understood unless Krishna came as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I want to stop there, and I want to thank all the devotees online who've been taking part, Rakim Prabhu and Krishna Balaram Prabhu and Sarvadrik Prabhu, who commented, Vamsidas Babaji, thank you. Yeah, it was and Brenda Sooner is there also. Thank you very much. So if anyone has any reflections or comments on this topic today, you can share something. Gorni Tai Prabhu in Hungary has commented that some say that Krishna left Vrindavan because he couldn't bear the situation, being able to reciprocate the worship of his most intimate gopi friends who were burning in separation. But isn't it that he caused that separation? Well, the nature of the love of the gopis is that it's very contradictory. In the book by my Guru Maharaj, what is it titled? The Last Limit of Bhakti. He speaks about this and how the gopis' love is very contradictory. In chapter 3, Nectar and Poison Combined. Let's see if I can find his comments here about this. Yes. There's some viparita, or some opposing thing, which contradictory thing is there. Viruddha Dharma. And this is the nature of the gopis' love. It seems very contradictory. So Krishna saw that. Acharyas have commented. He saw that in a place called Prem Sarovar, which is right next to Barsana, when Srimati Radharani was sitting in Krishna's lap, and a bumblebee came, and Madhu Mangal, who happened to be there, bravely drove the bumblebee away because Radharani was afraid of the bee, who was buzzing around her lotus-like eyes and face, thinking they were lotus flowers. Madhu Mangal drove them away, and then he proudly proclaimed that Madhusudan is gone. And Madhusudan is a name for Krishna. Madhusudan also means a bumblebee. And Radharani is sitting on Krishna's lap. But she hears Madhu Mangal's words that Madhusudan is gone, and Radharani begins to cry. Oh, Krishna's gone. Where is Krishna? And Krishna, seeing Radharani's ecstasy, she began crying and crying. He began to cry. And it created that pond, which is still there today, known as Prem Sarovar. So this is called Prema Vaititya. Of the 4 different types of separation that Srila Rupa Goswami gives in his Ujjvala Nilamani, Purva Ragas Tatamana, Prema Vaititya Mityapi Pravasas Chitti Katito Vipralambas Chaturvidaha. This is the 3rd. It's separation when there's union. And this is the contrary nature of the gopis' love. So they're with Krishna, but they're feeling separation. And Krishna thought to himself that when they're with me, they're feeling separation, but when I'm gone, in their madness, they're feeling union. So better that I leave Vrindavan. So that's my reflection back on Gorni Tai Prabhu's nice comments He's commenting at some. Krishna left Vrindavan for so many reasons, and many different Vaishnavas give different reasons. We're trying to analyze some of these. He said some say that Krishna left because he couldn't bear the separation, being unable to reciprocate the worship of the gopis. This is one reason. How can he reciprocate? So the only way he can reciprocate is to become Gauranga Mahaprabhu, which means he has to leave. He has to feel the pangs of separation of the gopis. So he leaves, and in this 47th chapter, this is the height of the gopis' feelings of separation. He later comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we hear in the 19th and 20th chapters of the Anta-lila that Mahaprabhu was completely absorbed in the mood of the gopis at Uddhava Keri, where this Brahma Gita was being spoken. This is how he reciprocated with them. So there's a few other comments here from devotees I'd like to read over. Thank you all very much for taking part in things. I really appreciate it. Dara Raman Prabhu and Brenda Sundari comments. She said it's very different than self-loathing, fox humility. Rather, it's a genuine disgust for false fame. And she's then saying, thank you for bringing us to the, Krishna Balan Prabhu is saying, thank you for bringing us to the spiritual world by our ears through hearing. So I'm trying to see here. I thought there was a few other comments too. Sometimes it doesn't show them. Yeah, it shows there's 10 comments. I have to just one moment. I don't know why, but it doesn't show all the comments. Krishna Kun, do you see them? Oh, here, Bindu Sundari also commented, I'm appreciating this topic of contradictions and contradictory nature and the example you give of Vamsidas Babaji's actions to transcendentally mislead others in the direction of not attracting respect for himself. It's a very beautiful thing. It's a very important thing for devotees to understand. Paradoxically, the thing which is the most pleasing for us, for Krishna, our preaching, can also paradoxically be something which can be our downfall. If we feel ourselves to be better than others. And just like the word preach has a number of different meanings in English, let me open up my dictionary here on my computer. Okay, the word preach means to deliver a sermon or a religious address to an assembled group of people, to publicly proclaim a religious message. But it also means, another meaning is to give moral advice to someone in an annoying or pompously self-righteous way. That's one of the meanings of preach. So there can be some pride that comes there. And it's a difficult thing to balance both. We need to do our preaching under the guidance of exalted Vaishnavas, of senior Vaishnavas, of Gurudev. Otherwise, we can think that preaching means to advertise myself and tell everybody about myself. And therefore we should be very, very careful in our preaching, in our sharing of Krishna Katha. It means that we should be speaking about Krishna and not speaking about other things. So I want to thank everybody very much. If there's any other final reflections or comments, Krishna Kun, you have something? You can speak a little loud.
I love this point that the Gopis said that Buddha's real purpose is to come and kill us by speaking about Krishna. It's kind of pretty heavy view of things. But I particularly appreciated this point that they said, I mean, I don't know the Sanskrit, we would have to look it up, maybe you can help me there. But at least the translation said that they're committing genocide. Because it's not all the Gopis who would think like that. If we judge by the Tavakatamitam verse, some Gopis would think like this, but some would not. Those Gopis...
The Sapaksha didn't think like it, but the Vipaksha did.
The Vipaksha Gopis would think like this, that because it's mass murder, genocide is a mass murder of a particular group. So those who have that kind of bath towards Krishna, that they feel that topics about him are poison and they're just going to die because of the separation. But some Gopis would appreciate it and they would be pacified and talk about the auspiciousness of the so I just kind of appreciating the genocide use of that word here.
And it's very reflective, isn't it, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat story. It's also found in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahaprabhu just chanting Gopi Gopi and becoming furious when they tell him to chant Krishna's name. Why are you telling me to chant Krishna's name for? It's nonsense.
I have a couple of kind of questions or doubts.
That's great.
I'm thinking about.
Hope I'm not in trouble.
No, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives this beautiful example about the goldsmith. Just as the goldsmith is melting the gold to show its purity, so melting it with fire, heating it, and then everything which, if it's adulterated, then all the bad things come out of it, like all the non-pure, the impurities come out. So similarly, Krishna left and melted the hearts of the gopis with Vipralamba Agni, so that the purity of their love can be shown. But I'm just thinking that it's an awful high price to show, like if you really love someone, would you really want to put them into suffering like that just to show their greatness? Wouldn't, why show it to others? Who cares about others? You care about the person you love.
Okay. It's a natural doubt, and perhaps to address that natural unspoken doubt, our acharyas like Sanatana Goswami and Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and Chaitanya Charitamrita have described that it's two things simultaneously.
Yeah,
it's two opposites, in Guru Maharaj's language, two opposites in one container. It's the greatest suffering and pain, but paradoxically it's also the greatest happiness and pleasure at the same time, and it's just indescribable. Sanatana Goswami gets in a long explanation about this, both in the Mula Shlokas and in his commentary in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, as does Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srila Prabhupada in his commentary speaks about it too.
Because there is this description of Brihad Bhagavatamrita about this, yes, that this is also the greatest pleasure. So is Krishna conscious of that? I mean, we know that he's omniscient.
Well, according to some commentaries, this is why Krishna left, to enhance the ecstasy of the gopis and bring it to a greater limit, because he wanted to show the glory of them, because he couldn't, how can he repay their love for him? Their love for him is expressed, yapratiyatu sadhuna, as Krishna says, by their behavior. So he said, let your own behavior be your glory. So he had to advertise their behavior, because how do you reciprocate with expressions of love? You have to show what great expressions are, and then you have to experience them yourself.
I also find it interesting that you said that some say that Krishna left to reciprocate with the feelings of the gopis because he couldn't reciprocate in Vrindavan.
Goni Thakur mentioned that.
He had to feel separation himself, so he went to Mathura. But then he obviously failed. He had to come as Mahaprabhu, because even in Mathura, even though he was crying tears of love and his pillow was wet and in separation from the gopis, it wasn't good enough. It looks like it wasn't good enough because he didn't have the love of Radharani specifically.
Part of the problem in his relishing those feelings of the gopis that we find described in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Mathura and Dwarka, especially Dwarka, is that he was alone. There was really no one there with him who could help those feelings. And therefore Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says the gopis can only be understood, or the pastimes of Radha and Krishna can only be understood and only expanded in association with the gopis. And this is why Guru Maharaj comments, we just posted something today on Facebook, a quote from that Raghava Pandit put together. Let me just read this nice quote. Krishna never looks at outward appearance, he looks into the heart. Vaishnavas means those who are followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, those who are like gopis. They're enjoyed by Krishna. The guru or spiritual master who comes here, who comes in the line of disciplic succession of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Krishna, is a gopi, a companion of Srimati Radharani. This is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes Nikunja Yuno Rati Keli Siddhyai, that this is the quality of Gurudev, that he's, Brinda Sundari is asking me to repeat Krishna Kun's question. This is why you got to speak really loud, Krishna Kun. You came up here, but you still got to speak loud. You're speaking so soft. So her question was, that how do we understand that this is love if Krishna's putting him into such intense feelings of pain? How can we describe that as love? And so that I'm in response to that, I'm citing Brihad Bhagavatamrita and Chaitanya Charitamrita, how it's a combination of the greatest nectar and the greatest poison at the same time. Okay? And Rakim Prabhu says, hearing katha like this makes the material world meaningless. Yes. And therefore, this is the point that the Gopis are making, that Rupa Goswami presents in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where they address each other as dimba, or childlike person, and they say that Sanke Nitya Sapari Dasamaskanda Padya Valinam, that what are you doing listening to the syllables of the 10th canto? It's going to completely spoil your dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. You're not going to be interested in those things anymore. This is a wonderful, wonderful quality of Krishna Katha when we want to hear about the feelings of the Braj Gopikas. Very, very important topic. Okay, Krishna, can you have something else?
This is just one sentence.
Speak loud.
One sentence, specifically what you said on that point, that it has to be experienced in connection with the Gopis. It has to be in the association of the Gopis. By such distress-filled prayers,
Loudly.
when will I obtain such mercy as to reside in Vraj and become the Dasi of the Dasi of the Dasis of Radhika? When will I eternally serve you both? By such distress-filled prayers, Gopiva will rise in the heart by the mercy of Shri Radha's Sakis, the eternally perfected Gopis of Vraja. This is a commentary on a verse of Rupa Goswami. I wanted to just...
Yeah, there's many statements like this. It's so important. Even when Krishna himself wants to understand the mood of Radha, he can't do it. He has to take help from the Gopis. And therefore, when he comes, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lalita and Vishaka come as Roy Rama, Srup Damodar and Roy Ramananda in the Gambhira to help him understand that. Vrinda Sundari comments, it's uplifting to hear and be reminded of the Gopis, the most elevated devotees every week. Every week, every day, every hour, every minute.
It's just so nice that now we understand
second.
why our Gurudevas are telling us, do sadhu sangha, now, here, do sadhu sangha. Without that you cannot get.
So important. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else here. Thank you, Gauni Tai Prabhu, and thank you, Vrinda Sundari, thank you, Krishna Kun, thank you all the devotees who made comments. And Pranam Sasarva Dirk Prabhu, please forgive me for speaking in front of you. You're my Guru Jana, my God brother, my Guru Maharaj. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Binda Ki Jai, Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol, Vanchakalpatarubhishcha, Kripa